Over on the left, put the word deny. Because if someone accuses us of something and we deny it, we end up arguing their point and going down the rabbit hole of accusations. Over on the right, we redirect it with these 4 words. What do you mean? Well, what do you mean? Well, I've left 3 messages and no one's called me back. Now we know the real issue and we can address that instead of reacting to their attack.
This is the Leadership Foundry Podcast. I'm your host this week, Brandon Smith. And our guest this week is Sam Horn. Sam Horn is the founder and CEO of the Tung Fu Training Institute. Sam spends her time consulting with executives, speaking, writing, doing TED Talks, all on how we communicate better. And Sam's going to talk about her newest and latest book, Talking on Eggshells, today, and give us a masterclass on words to use and not use. So really hone in on my conversation with Sam and see what tips and tricks you can take away to make you a better leader starting tomorrow. Sam, so good to see you again, and thank you so much for coming on the Leadership Foundry Podcast.
Well, you're welcome, Brandon. I've really been looking forward to sharing some new stories and insights with your audience.
Likewise. So, Sam, I love not only our last conversation that we had some years ago, but I really, really love the work that you do and how you're trying to promote just good, healthy conversations and tools for leaders out in the world. So before we jump into your latest and greatest creation, that book that you're kind of bringing out to the world, and we talk about that. For listeners that maybe aren't as familiar with you, can you maybe share a little bit about kind of who you are and kind of what keeps you up every day?
Well, thank you. I had the privilege of working with Rod Laver, Grand Slam champion Rod Laver, right out of college. And he really modeled for me proactive grace leadership. Is that he was a very hard worker, and no matter, he would be out running on the beach and people would stop him. I saw you play in St. Louis, and he was always gracious. And so it kind of sent me on a mission about how can we show up in life and in work and be this lovely balance of proactive. We get things done, we're productive, and we're also gracious. Seth Godin said, kindness has not left the building. And as leaders, I think we have a responsibility to set the precedent for kindness that sets up a ripple effect of respect.
Yeah. So how long have you been in this space of helping advise leaders, writing on a lot of these topics? Tell us a little bit about that journey.
I've had the privilege more than 20 years of speaking, writing, and consulting. So when I speak, it's for organizations like Intel, Accenture, Oracle, Asian Leadership Conference, U.S. Embassy in London. And when I write, it's books like Tung Fu. It's got your attention. It is Someday is Not a Day in the Week, about how to stop procrastinating and focus on what's important now. And then I also consult. So if an executive is working on a TEDx talk, or if an entrepreneur wants a new mission or message for the organization, I can help them come up with something that's one of a kind instead of one of many.
Yeah, that's beautiful. So now let's pivot to your latest and greatest creation. Tell us about the book. And I'd love to hear a little bit about kind of the not only the purpose of the book, but what inspired you to write it.
We're probably both familiar with Simon Sinek. Simon has made a difference for a lot of people with Start With Why. I find it's even more effective to start with where, because if we start with why, well, I want it to make a difference for people. Everyone wants to do that. So that's generic. The genius is in start with where, because when we share where we begin to care, that's when people know where we're coming from, and that's when they begun to care. So here's my where story for the Talking on Eggshell book. I was doing a Tung Fu workshop, and a gentleman put his hand up and he said, I work for a lawyer who is very volatile. He's so demanding. He's so arrogant. He said the entire team tiptoes around this guy because we never know what's going to set him off. It's like we're walking on eggshells. It's just so stressful. I said, oh, you're not walking on eggshells. You're talking on eggshells, right? And I think we all have at least one person in that life, and we always worry we're going to say something wrong, and we don't know what to say right, and it is stressful. And so I wrote, what can we say and not say in those stressful situations that we face every day?
So as you were writing the book and exploring this challenging topic, what were some of the big highlights or aha moments you had in the book?
You know, I interviewed people and I said, okay, what do you handle almost on a daily basis? And you don't know what to say because anxiety can be defined in 2 words, not knowing. And if someone's complaining nonstop and we don't know what to say to help them or give them what they want, or if someone's blaming us for something that's not our fault, if someone is finger pointing and so forth. So what I did is identify the 28 most common scenarios that we face at work and as leaders. And then each chapter in the book is like, all right, here's words to lose that make things worse. Here's words to use that make things better. And now in each situation from now on, instead of floundering and suffering from I wish I'd said syndrome and thinking of the perfect response on the way home, we have options that you can use in the minute that help instead of hurt. One of my favorites?
Yes, please.
Good. Well, let's talk about what to do when people complain. Now, Brandon, you know me, is that one of the things I learned from running Maui Writers Conference for 17 years is to ink it when we think it, in particular, to juxtapose our ideas because it makes complex ideas crystal clear. So unless people are driving, I hope they get a fresh piece of paper and put a vertical line down the center. Because we're going to talk about reactions on the left, these are words to lose, and proactive on the right, which are words to use. So let's talk about what to do if someone complains. If someone complains, don't explain. Because we think if we explain why this went wrong, people will forgive us. No, they get angrier because explanations come across as excuses. It makes people feel we're not being accountable. So over on the left, put explain, and over on the right, put the A train. Agree, apologize, and act. So someone says, this meeting was supposed to start at 9 o'clock. Oh, I know, but half our people aren't here and we're having problems with our Zoom. And no, you're right. Agree. It was supposed to start at 9 o'clock. A for apologize. And I'm sorry, you've ended up waiting. A for act. And we've asked our tech guy to help us out. We're going to be up and running in 2 minutes. Thanks for your patience. Do you see how the A train expedites complaints? Explanations aggravate them.
Absolutely. So it reminds me, and listeners to my podcast have probably heard me use this example before, but there's a form of martial arts called Aikido. And Aikido, the entire purpose of Aikido, or the whole methodology or mindset, is you never attack your opponent. You redirect their energy. And to me, it feels exactly the same way. We're not attacking and explaining and making it a conflict. We're acknowledging. We're going with that energy. And we're saying, you're right. You're right. Yes. And apologize and agree. And now let's move forward. And it kind of gets them to kind of drop their armor and weapons a little bit sooner, which is productive. So I love that, Sam.
Brandon, see, we don't fight fire with fire, right? We fight fire with water. And here's another example, because talking on eggshells and Kung Fu have both been called martial arts for the mind and mouth. So over on the left, let's imagine that someone accuses us of something that's not true. Someone says, you don't care about your customers. Well, our first reaction is to deny that. We do too care about our customers. And guess what? We're arguing with our customers about whether we care about our customers. So over on the left, put the word deny. Because if someone accuses us of something and we deny it, we end up arguing their point and going down the rabbit hole of accusations. Over on the right, we redirect it with these 4 words. What do you mean? Well, what do you mean? Well, I've left 3 messages and no one's called me back. Now we know the real issue and we can address that instead of reacting to their attack.
I love that. And so I was trained as a clinical therapist, and it reminds me of one of the classic, which I still use all the time, classic clinical therapist phrases is, say more about that. And it's almost like that. You could just say more about that. Or what do you mean by that? Or just say a little more. And then, of course, they'll say more. And then now you have context. So you know what you're dealing with. I love that. Well, Sam, I really love this direction. Can we do a few more?
Oh, but is this a rhetorical question? So let's talk about what to do if someone's taking their frustration or anger out on us. Because in today's world, many people are short-staffed, or they're working remote, or they have teams, that are international on different time zones, etc. So I'll tell the story of my 84-year-old Aunt Kay, who actually volunteers in a hospital. She did this even during COVID. And I asked what it was like, and she said one word: stressful. I said, put me in the scene where someone was unfairly taking their anger out on you. Brendan, she didn't even have to think about it. She said a woman had run into the ER holding her phone up saying, I just got a text from my daughter. She was in a car accident. She's in the ER. I need to see her. Well, Kate called the ER. There was somebody already with the daughter. Now, you probably remember the rules back in COVID is only one visitor per patient. She had to deliver that bad news to the woman. And now many of us leaders have to deliver bad news. And what happened? The woman lost it. She started screaming at Aunt Kay. Now, over on the left, put the words, how rude. How rude. It's not my fault. Why are you blaming me? I didn't make the rules, And instead, over on the right, put these 4 words. How would I feel? How would I feel if my daughter were in the ER and I couldn't get in to see her? It gave Kay the incentive to move from contempt to compassion, from impatience to empathy, from there's nothing I can do to what if there's something I can do? She called the ER back. Guess what? She said, who is with the daughter? It was the Uber driver who had brought the young woman in.
Oh, jeez.
She was able to explain the situation. He left. The woman was able to get together with the daughter. And now, Brendan, think as leaders, over on the left, how rude, not my fault. I didn't make the rules. It's a policy, etc. Down the rabbit hole of fighting. Over on the right, how would I feel? Often moves us to compassion and empathy to see if there's something we can do instead of telling them why we can't. I
just absolutely love that. Okay, Sam. Would you be willing? I don't want you to spoil the book for us, but would you be willing to share one more?
Is this another rhetorical question, right, Brandon? Okay. Now, I'll use a personal example because this is the leadership show, and many leaders are parents or grandparents or uncles or aunts or whatever. So let's use a personal example, and then we'll talk about how we can use it at work. I was visiting my son, Andrew, in New York, and his 1-year-old son, Hero, crawled across the floor, pulled himself up on a guitar in the guitar, started pounding on the strings. Now, over on the left, Hero was doing something wrong. Andrew could have said no. He could have yanked the guitar away. He could have said, stop pounding on the strings, all of which would have made the situation worse. Instead, Andrew said one word. Do you know what it was?
No.
Gentle.
Oh, gentle.
And Brandon, I saw Hero's face transform in front of me. And he reached back, he went strong, strong, strong. And it was because Andrew shaped his behavior instead of shamed it. He coached him how to do it right instead of criticizing him for doing it wrong. My dad used to say we can't make people do better by making them feel bad. And from now on, when people make a mistake or an employee, somebody's doing something wrong, instead of telling them what to stop doing, tell them what to start doing. Instead of criticizing them for doing it wrong, let's coach them how to do it right. And if we do, instead of losing face over the mistake and resenting us, they will actually learn from that mistake, and we're showing them how to do it better instead of making him feel bad.
So Sam, I love that. So now I've got some context questions for you on how context shapes some of these great skills and tools. So here's my first one. Ever since the pandemic, we are in this weird place right now, hybrid, in person. Some companies are requiring more in person. Employees are pushing back and still a little more hybrid. And we're going, who knows where this is going to land, but some version of this is going to be the future. Yes. So how does virtual impact our ability to have some of these conversations? Do you find it's harder? Do you find it's easier? Do we give people more grace, less grace? I would be curious on your observations around that.
You know, Brendan, and with your education, you know that unfortunately anonymity can lead when people feel they're not being seen. it gives them permission to be mean. And what we're finding is that if we are virtual and we have cameras off, that either people are often distracted, they're doing email or they're doing something else, or they say something they would never say if it was face-to-face. Because if we're face-to-face and we have a conscience, we're looking at the other person and we instantly see the consequences of saying something that was unkind or something that was abrupt. And often then we self-reflect and we self-correct. We can see, you know what, that was a little harsh. I'm sorry, it's the end of a long day. Let me say that a different way, right? However, if cameras are off and we are not looking at people, either we're halfway not there or we say something without seeing and considering the consequences. So the bad news is it is getting worse. And the good news is we can correct it. We can do better.
So is there any tips or tricks you might have for us if we find ourselves in virtual settings like that, where, we're trying to have one of these conversations and it's, employee or a manager, but we've never actually met? How might we navigate that differently?
I'm so glad you said that, because there's a technique called name the game, and it's often when something is going wrong. Like if we work for a senior and a junior, a father-son team or something like that. I remember an office manager said to me, it's so frustrating. Senior will come in and say, this is my top priority. And then half an hour later, junior comes in and says, no, this is the top priority. I said, what are they doing? She says, well, they're putting me in the middle. I said, say that. Say, sir, your dad just gave me a project, said that's my first. Please don't put me in the middle. Now, name the game also works in positive situations. So if we're a leader and we've got an international team, say, I have not had the opportunity or privilege to meet all of you, and I would like us to feel connected even though we're on different continents. So today, I'm going to ask each of you to give a 60-second introduction, not just professional, personal. So, we find out we both coach our son's soccer league. We find out we're both athletes or sing in the choir, so that we are connecting with each other personally and professionally, and we are a team that pulls together instead of pulls apart. So by asking people to put their cameras on, by giving them an opportunity to give a hook on which to hang a conversation. So they're not just our tech team, it's that we find out that we both went to the same college, or that we both are into football or whatever, that we are taking responsibility for creating connective tissue, even if we're miles apart.
I love the name the game idea. I also like the extension of that. You didn't say it this way, but also stating your intentions, being able to state those. So my experience has been in absence of communication, people tend to assume the worst. So if you can state your intentions, then that's what Sam's trying to do. Okay, I'm going to give her grace. I'm going to help her because I see her intentions are noble and I want to help her achieve those.
Brandon, I'm so glad you brought that up, because I think we mentioned anxiety can be defined in 2 words, not knowing.
Right.
And many companies are going through changes right now. And many times as a leader, we think, well, when we get news, we'll tell people what's happening. Meanwhile, they're in a state of anxiety. And as you said, Brandon, they're filling in the blanks. So there's something called interim information, and that's getting in touch with people before something has been resolved or announced. And say, you may have been hearing that we're in the middle of an accusation, and I am not in a position to confirm all the logistics at this point. Please know that when I am, you will be the first person to know. And when we get in touch with people, sometimes even to tell them that we can't tell them, they may not like it, at least they accept it. And you said the word noble. People feel we're treating them with respect instead of keeping them in the dark. I
love that too, because so often when I will ask groups what's critical to effective leadership and leadership communication, they love to say transparency. But there's sometimes as leaders, we can't be transparent, but of what's going on behind the scenes. But we can say, I'm sorry, I'm not ready to talk about this thing yet, or we're not ready to talk about this thing. We're still working through the details, but please just give me a little bit of patience and grace. So I love that we're still honoring transparency, even when there might be cases when we can't be fully transparent. So I love that.
Isn't that? And Jonathan Swift says you cannot reason someone out of something they were not reasoned into. So over on the left, we put the word reasoning because, as a therapist and as a leadership executive, et cetera, that when we give people the rationale behind the decision, sometimes, once again, they understand it, they don't like it. Look over on the right if we use the words I wish. I wish I were in a position to tell you more.
Yeah.
In fact, we certified people in this, and I'll always remember a woman said that her brother was her best friend and was very close. He had ignored his health, and it got to the point he had such problems. He went in, had a battery of tests, and the doctor called, and he said, please come in tomorrow at 9 and please bring a family member. And Gwen knew that that was not good news, and they went in. The doctor had all of the tests on the desk and up behind him. He did not even look up. He said, it's stage 4 cancer. We caught it too late. There's nothing we can do. Ooh. And Gwen wanted to reach across the table and say, couldn't you at least say, I wish there were more I could do?
Right.
Do you see, the word I wish has humanity in it. There's nothing I can do. Makes people feel we don't care.
Okay. All right, Sam, this is going to be my last official question. It's a tough one. It's a bit of a curveball. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
Okay. Crisis communication. All right. So now we've got a leader. Let's just take one of the classic examples we've seen in the last 5 or 6 years. And for some reason, it seems to keep popping up. Airlines. Okay. So let's say we're CEO of an airline company and something has not gone well, either on one of our planes in how we handled a particular issue with a customer